Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined as always by Chris Bouguet. Hey, Chris.
What's going on, Rachel? I have a great story for you. I don't think I've shared this with you before. Stop me if I have.
Okay. Ready.
So you know how I had the opportunity to go to the Communication Matters conference over in Leeds, which is in England. And I shared some stories here on the podcast. There's many more to share. One of them I wanted to tell you about, though, was Open Mic Night. Did I tell you about Open Mic Night?
No.
Okay, excellent. So at this particular conference, I guess this is a little bit of a tradition, is that this is done at a university campus, and on that campus there is a bar, and they don't really rent out the bar. The bar is open for everybody, but they do schedule out that they are going to take the stage space and they are going to make it an open mic night where people can come up and do just that. They can spend a few minutes using the open mic. But in this case, it's all AAC users. So it's, or the vast majority are AAC users. I'm pretty sure it's all AAC users. When I got there, there was a band playing, and that band, I believe most were AAC users, but I'm not sure everyone was. Anyway, they were all people with disabilities that had come together and created a band. And so it was this awesome experience that I just wanted to kind of share some of the coolness around this, because one thing that they did that was really intentional was to make sure that it was an open event, right? So that it wasn't just a closed event, whereas people at the conference. So what's kind of cool about that is you have some college kids, and a lot of kids are not coming back from school yet, but some were. So it's a public place. So you come, and we met people there that weren't there as part of the conference that were seeing open mic night with people who use AAC, telling jokes and sharing stories and dancing and things like that. And that's what it was. Like, it wasn't necessarily you had to say something. You could just get up and dance, right? Mm-hmm. So there was an MC that uses an AAC device. And so it was just kind of cool to be in a public space, right? Wouldn't it be cool? Can you imagine, like, you're out with your friends and all of a sudden you pop into a bar and what's going on over there? Open mic night? And suddenly it's, a parade of AAC users, one after another, all showing off their talents, right? It would be so awesome.
So awesome. I'd be losing it.
Yeah. Now, something else that I sort of noticed there, and it's been on my mind ever since, is that so you can kind of imagine like the stage, right? It wasn't really a stage. It was just more of an open area. Like, you didn't have to get up on anything, just an open space, right? And tables had been moved to make this open space. So there's a wall, and then there's the space, and then there's this sort of semicircle opening that space, and everyone's sort of looking at the semicircle. And on the sides of this bar is there's a bar, and on the other side there are booths, right, that you can sit in, and everyone's sort of trying to angle their seats and angle up to the bar to kind of look at the stage, right? Well, as you're doing this, there's a number of AAC users that are in the crowd watching, like either they're going to be preparing, or maybe they just got off stage, or they're not actually participating in the open mic night. They're like where they're going to be on stage. They're just there to enjoy a beverage and watch the show, Mm-hmm. And a part of that is I was like standing behind a number of AAC users, and I realized, again, being someone that has some experience being around AAC users, like, I can see your words, I can see your AAC device. And if you were to start to formulate something, or maybe you weren't formulating something, or you were about to, and you started to make some words, and it's not to me, it's to the person to your right or to your left who you're talking to, the fact that I'm standing behind you, I can see those words. And it felt like immediately I diverted my eyes. Like, that's an invasion of privacy. Like, I shouldn't be looking at that, right? In the same way that if you were, let's say you were at a cubicle talking and you heard somebody at the cubicle next to you was being really loud and you could overhear them, you'd be like, it's kind of, hey, guys, I just want you to know I can hear you, right? Like, I want you to know that I can hear, like, that'd be the polite thing to do, to let them know that. And it just felt like this moment of, yeah, when we think about Kathy Howery and how her episodes have talked about the lived experience, what does it mean to have a lived experience where people can start to see the formulation of your message, even though everyone else might be eavesdropping, if you will. Like, I'm not formulating that message for you. I'm not formulating it for the crowd. I'm formulating it for this one person, and other people can see it, right? Where if I was talking to you, if you and I were sitting next to each other in a bar and I wanted to talk to you, no one could kind of pre-plan out what I was saying. I would just kind of whisper it to you or say it to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like such a good point. And I also feel like it kind of brings up this interesting idea around some of these nuances and supporting some of these nuances with the work that we do with our clients. Because I've met a lot of different AAC users. Some have each word has voice output as they're building their sentence. Other AAC users choose to not have that feature, and they are building their entire kind of thought and sentence, and then they hit kind of the message display, and it gives the voice output. Even I was thinking about Noah Callan. I remember that interview. He actually had his device had the text display kind of pointed towards a communication partner directly in front of him, so you could read each kind of word of his message as he was formulating. So I feel like it's interesting because from what I've learned from AAC users, those are all personal choices that you can make, and preferences that you could have. And so it's interesting to think about. And also from kind of the therapist angle, because we have a lot of speech therapists listening to this podcast, like, how do we support those preferences? How do we help AAC users come to make those decisions? And I think that's an important part of the process.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a couple things to say there. That front-facing window that you're talking about, I was recently at the United Ability Conference listening to an AAC user talk about that specific feature and how a previous device didn't have one, and now I have that, and I love that it's there because people give me longer wait time where they wouldn't have before. And even if he did turn on this, he didn't say this, I'm adding this to it, is that even if he should turn on the audio word by word, now I have a multimodal experience. So meaning the communication partner has a multimodal experience. They're listening to each word and reading it as it's being formulated, So yeah, how do we support people through those choices? And then the other thing about that is, and I think this is something that I have grown definitely over the last, 7 years-ish of doing the podcast, is that it's probably situational, meaning it's not, well, this, you always have it on or you always have it off, but depending on the situation that I'm in, this is when I might want to have that on or might want to have it off. And as a therapist, those are the sorts of maybe situations we might talk through. Like, okay, what do you got coming up this weekend? How are you going to do that? Are you going to turn those things on? Are you going to turn those off? How do you know? What about next time? How do we reflect on that afterwards? Hey, so you said you were going to do this. Did you do that? And did it work? It was too complicated to turn it on, so I just left it off, or it was too complicated to turn it off, so I just left it on. Whatever the scenario is, having those sorts of conversations and teaching people that way, I think, is the way to go. Like creating scenarios and asking reflective questions.
I think it's also, I experienced this maybe like a month or two ago when I was working with a client, and this is a younger student, but this student, we were working on some type of share for their class. So like what the prompt was, like the best thing I did over the weekend or something like that. And, having that, the student formulate their response and then saving that response so that it could be quickly accessed. That's something that, we can help our students start understanding. And I think so often, especially for younger children, we're kind of taking their device and we're like, okay, like, let me just input this message so that they can participate. But we should be including students in that process and showing them what their device is capable of. And that is a feature that, even if you have a student who, is just an emergent communicator and we're, still supporting those skills being learned, like, don't forget to include the student in that process, because over time, if every Monday they have the opportunity to participate and shared what they did over the weekend, and we're including students in that process, both with the formulating of the sentence that they could share, but also teaching them how to save that response, where they can access that response, like, that's all beautiful teaching opportunities for students. And I think sometimes we just, take the student's device and then we kind of plug away like the things and then we make it super easy. But these are all teaching opportunities for kids. And I feel like it's been an important reminder for me, because I was also like, oh yeah, let me just take the device and like, now they can share what they did over the weekend. But there's so many beautiful teaching opportunities if we think through that lens.
Yeah, I mean, that's the place to start, right? Thinking through that lens of how do I make this a teaching opportunity? Absolutely. Well, all right. So with all that said, what's our interview today?
Chris, I'm so excited. We had the opportunity to do a Talking with Tech Live with Isaac, the Vibes of AAC conference. So I'm super excited. We love doing Hold on, Michaela. We love doing Talking with Tech Lives. Every Talking with Tech Live is a different experience, and I was super excited to participate and be asked to be a part of this amazing international AAC conference. And so this is part one of our Talking with Tech Live with Isaac.
If you enjoy Talking with Tech, we could use your help in spreading the word about the podcast. Please take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. The more positive reviews the podcast gets, the easier it becomes for others to find it. The more people who find the podcast, the more the word spreads about how to effectively consider and implement AAC. And who doesn't want that? If that sounds good to you, please take a moment and give the podcast a quick review. We'd so very much appreciate it. Now, let's get back into the episode.
So welcome, everybody. This is, as the slide says, Talking with Tech Live, brainstorming solutions to real-life AAC questions. We are very excited to have Chris and Rachel with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Take it away.
Amazing. Thank you, Vicki. I'm going to share the slides really quickly. We don't really need a lot of slides for this, though, which is really exciting. Let me share. Okay. Everyone can see that? Yeah? Chris?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great.
I'm putting the link in the chat as well.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm Rachel Meadle. I'm SLP, AAC specialist. I own a private practice in LA, and I have the great fortune to co-host an amazing podcast with this guy, Chris, which we're going to talk about in a second. Here are all of my financial disclosures, none of which are really relevant to today. If you go down here to this link, there is every financial disclosure I have. So if you're interested, that's where you got to go. And here are all the ways to connect with me. So I'm really active on social media. And I have lots of resources on my website, a YouTube channel, all the things. And I'm going to give it over to Chris, this guy.
Hi, everybody.
This guy who likes to dance.
So my name is Chris Bouguet. I am the Assistive Technology Specialist for Loudoun County Public Schools, which is in the Northern Virginia area. We understand this is Isaac, so there's people from all over the world here, Rachel. But I live in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Rachel said she owns a private practice out in Los Angeles, so we're on different coasts here in the United States. I work for a public school. Rachel is private practice. But our views on assistive technology and AAC really line up. It's a really great partnership of how a private and public sort of can have the same philosophies and work together. So I've had the great fortune to write a couple books besides the day job working in public school. That you can see them there. But I do a couple courses. There's my disclosures as well. But let's talk about Talking with Tech, Rachel, because that's most relevant. So real quick, put it in the Q&A, I guess. We can see your responses, but I guess you can't see each other's. Have you heard of Talking with Tech? However you can communicate that to us. Put it in the chat. We might be the only ones to see it, but have you heard of Talking with Tech? Or if you haven't heard of it, just tell that too. Completely new. New to me. Put it in so we can see it.
Yeah, we're excited to Hold on, I need to pull up the chat.
Grace says, nope, haven't heard of it. All right, Grace, we'll give you the little. Katarina says it's new. Sarah says, yes, I've heard about your podcast, but maybe that doesn't mean Sarah's listened to it yet. Sabadina says she's from California, Rachel.
Wow, Sabina, I feel like your name sounds familiar.
She's been listening to the podcast since 2000.
Wow, 2000. Well, our podcast hasn't exactly been along that long, but how long have we been doing the podcast, Chris?
We're closing in on our 7-year anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah, in February, it'll be our 7 years.
Wow. She's just so excited.
Let's see, anyone else? Oh, 2020, she corrected it. So for the last 4 years. Too funny. Okay, so for all these people who don't know what it is, Rachel, do you want to sort of describe what Talking with Tech is?
Yeah, I mean, we every week put out a new podcast. We interview thought leaders in the area of AAC, clinicians, parents, AAC users themselves, researchers. And we, in the beginning of each episode, have the chance to kind of share a little bit about a new idea, a small win, a struggle, a challenge. And it's all centered around AAC. And, you know, we started the podcast, exactly. We have our fun t-shirts. We started the podcast with the intention to just share and create another modality of learning, because we know that AAC takes a lot of time and there's a lot of things to learn when it comes to AAC. And so we thought we would start podcasting about it. And that was, like Chris said, 7 years ago.
Yeah, most episodes have a similar pattern where it's Rachel and I talking about something in the world of AAC or assistive technology. That might be something that happened in my world or Rachel's world, or a listener question, or some sort of event that we went to and we're telling each other about it. All sorts of different ways to kick off the podcast. And then it usually rolls over into some sort of interview, like Rachel said, all these different ones. You mentioned, Rachel, that we interview a lot of AAC users themselves. Real quick, would you put that in the Q&A? How many AAC users do you know that can say whatever they want to say, however they want to say it? They are completely can generate spontaneous, novel utterances. Put that in the. We'll read out your numbers real quick. We won't even say your names. We'll just tell you the numbers that we see. Let's see, any numbers coming through in the Q&A or, the chat, whatever, how you can communicate it. How many AAC users do you know can say whatever they want to say, however they want to say it? It's kind of an interesting question here, Rachel. At the Isaac Vibes of AAC conference, oftentimes we're talking to school districts or some private organizations or something, right? So maybe we'll get a different answer here. Yeah, Anonymous, and yes, the chat is disabled, but you can do it in the Q&A. If you put stuff in the Q&A, we can see it. So one person says 5, someone says maybe 15, don't know the exact numbers, but this person works with adults. Maybe a dozen, all right. Maybe 1 or 2 working with young children. I would say less than 5, someone says. Not as many as I want, working tirelessly to get my son to be literate. 7, yeah. So these numbers, Rachel, don't you think they're a little bit higher than we usually see,
Yes.
Usually it's like 1 or 2. Maybe there's some, someone, yeah, 0. Goose eggs. That's one of the missions behind the podcast, is to connect people. Here we are, these professionals and adults maybe that are working with other adults or kids to help them learn language using AAC, yet we haven't met many people who can say whatever they want to say using AAC. So the idea is, well, if we can interview people on the podcast and they can tell us then what has worked for them, right? And share their stories and share their what not to do, right? What hasn't worked for them. This way, you as listeners of the podcast can learn from the AAC users themselves, not just the AAC users, parents, researchers, clinicians, many other people as well. But the AAC users seem to be our favorite episodes. Is that fair, Rachel?
Absolutely. They are. In fact, if you go to our website, talkingwithtech.org, we have a whole blog post that is updated. Actually, Luke, our podcast producer, just updated this to be current, and it has all the episodes we've done with AAC users. And they're definitely the ones I like to share the most, especially with parents and professionals that I'm working with. I think there's no better way to learn about how to support AAC users than to listen to those who have a lived experience of using AAC.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One little caveat here, Rachel, I'll also mention not every episode follows that pattern. Like the most recent episode that is out right now, it's actually Rachel and I exploring a generative AI tool called Notebook LM. So that's the other sort of, I think maybe a hallmark of our podcast is besides our fun little banter back and forth, Rachel, I think, and having awesome guests. We like to share different technology tips, tricks, new stuff that's coming out, especially with generative AI recently. We've seem to be talking about that a lot. But different technologies that we use in our practice or that we've seen use or that we're exploring use of. So the most recent episode, like I said, it's not really following that same format, but still, I think, really useful.
Yes, I've actually had some emails, Chris, in regards to that episode. People really love it. People are like, "Oh, this episode's so good." Some of my clients.
That's great.
Yeah. Here's the exciting thing, Chris. The people here, you're actually going to be on our podcast. So this is a collaborative session where we are going to have a discussion around all of the questions, all of the things that you're finding in your own clinical work that are challenging, that you feel stuck on. And so this whole session is meant to be collaborative and conversational in nature. And so we're recording and we are going to be airing this on the podcast. So we encourage you to ask a question, which we'll share in a second, how you can write in a question, but also to really encourage you guys to participate and to share your experience, because obviously Chris and I have a lot of experience in this realm and we're happy to share our experiences. But what we found from doing the session is that so many of the people who attend have really incredible ideas and can share lots of different perspectives and tools and resources. And so this is a collaborative session where we're all going to work together to talk through some of our biggest challenges.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's figure out how to do that, right? Because once it's all recorded, we'll put it out on the podcast. Then you can listen to yourself on the podcast and share with your family and friends and colleagues and be like, listen, I was on that, right? That's my question. Right? So here's how you share. We have Zoom has the Q&A section, but we'd rather you ask questions by going to this Google form. It's a very simple Google form. It only has, I think, 2 questions on it. One is your name, which is optional. And the second thing, what your question is, right? So that Google form, here, I'll throw the actual, just in case you have issues with Bitly, the bit.ly, I put that in the chat as well. Here it comes, the longer URL. If you click on that, you can ask a question using the Google form. That populates a Google Sheet, and a Google Sheet you're also going to have access to. Rachel has it up here. And so over in the first 3 columns, they're yellow right now, but they're also timestamp, name, and my question is. That's what's going to show up from the Google form. You type a question, it's going to pop up here. But you also are about to share the URL to this Google Sheet. We're going to put that in the chat because all the other columns that say solutions, ideas, strategy, tools, that's a place that you can go in and you can type yourself. So let's say Abigail has a question and it pops up over there in the first 3 columns, but Sarah has an experience about that could help Abigail you can put it over there. You can also raise your hand, and Vicky and Chloe will work to allow you to come on and ask the question verbally or respond verbally. Vocally, right? But also, if you would like, you can type your responses over there in the Google Sheet. So I'm going to share the Google Sheet.
And I will say, we hardly ever have the time to go through all the questions. So get your questions in fast and furious, because we're going to go in the order of which we've received them. Abby's already in there. We've got one.
Nice.
It's great.
Before we answer Abby's question, I want to point out one other thing about the slide deck, and that is, when I say we, I mean the collective we who is in this webinar right now, not just Rachel and I. And that is not our first rodeo. We've done this presentation before, but it's different every time we do it. If you look down at the bottom, you'll see tabs from other presentations, other versions of this. Yes, you can go listen to the episodes over in Talking with Tech, but there's also, you can see the questions that were asked over there as well, making it a giant, look at that Patreon one, Rachel, that has all those questions and all those responses from the people participating. There's lots of good information in here that you can look at, besides just this one here at the Vibes of AAC 2024. Okay, so without further ado, you want to read the first question?
Should we dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. Abby says, how do you get staff to model / pull out devices? I'm only laughing because I feel like we've all had that experience. I swear, without being rude, I try to make it very obvious that the devices need to be out when I'm not there. I shouldn't have to pull them out. Also, once they're out, please model. I do not want to burn bridges with staff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, this is a universally shared experience. We know that our students using AAC need to see AAC modeled in order for them to learn how to use that language. And so how do we get that buy-in? How do we get communication partners in a classroom or parents at home to actually model language? And I'm curious if anyone has any ideas before Chris and I dive in. What are some strategies that you've used to get more buy-in in classrooms with staff?
And you can raise your hand and we can bring you on. You can put it in the question and answer chat and we can read it out loud, or you can put it in the Google Sheet. All those different ways to participate.
Mm-hmm. Curious if anyone has ideas before I share.
Fun story, while people are typing in their responses or thinking about their answers, what I did all day today, Rachel, I did a full day presentation with one of my teammates for about 20 teachers, specifically on aided language stimulation. It was a little bit more than that. Obviously, it was presuming potential and some of the basics around AAC, like core vocabulary and things. But the vast majority of it was this exact question.
I have Abby says, it's Abby again. I do have half of my students, parents who care, but many who do not and aren't interested in being sent home. I'm guessing that means the AAC devices. Yeah, I mean, I think that we all have clients on our caseload where the communication partners have varying degrees of participation, I'll say, in, using AAC modeling. I find that for many of my students who have some verbal speech, but the verbal speech is not consistent or easily accessed, just the fact that they have some verbal speech means that we're not utilizing the AAC as much. I actually just observed one of my students in their OT session yesterday, and he has some verbal speech, very limited. And of course, I didn't see the device used at all. And so it's, I think, a common challenge.
I'm going to say that people will model. We've seen great success with people starting to learn how to model when we infuse a concept called coaching. And so often the way it has worked is that we have picked a thing All right, we spent a lot of time. We picked the right thing, and now we put it in the classroom. We've got the thing, and now we've got. Here's an hour. I'm going to show you. You know what you got to do. Here's what you got to do, Abigail. You got to model on that thing. All right, I'll be back in a week. We'll see how it does, or I'll be back tomorrow. Let's see. And it's like, okay, what does modeling look like? Well, okay, we can show you a video of it, but that's sort of like watching a video of someone, here we're in international, someone playing soccer or playing football, right? Just because you can see someone kick the ball really well doesn't mean that you can kick the ball really well. So we add in this component of coaching where we say, okay, the people that came to my training today in my school district, they left that day with the idea, oh, okay, I'm supposed to be touching the buttons while I'm sitting next to them. I understand that now. I'm supposed to be doing one or two words, and I'm supposed to be expanding when they say a word. I'm supposed to add another word to it, or I'm supposed to just talk, use self-talk. So I'm just going to narrate my own thoughts while I'm sitting next to them, right? They know conceptually, they left today conceptually with what to do, but they didn't actually know how to do it. So now their next step is the colleague that was with me, his name was John. John is going to meet with some of them. They're going to fan out and get a coach, and they're going to do 6 sessions of coaching where the first session is we're going to record them trying to model on the device. The second thing is we're going to count together. Let's make this a goal for you. What are you trying to do? I'm trying to do more self-talk. All right, let's count how many times you've done self-talk in this 5-minute window. And then we're going to come and visit you 2 or 3 more times and say, hey, you've been working on that self-talk goal. How's it going? How do you think that went? I was watching you, and I noticed some things, but I'm curious, what did you notice, right? Have some reflective questions, maybe summarize. All right, I think heard you say that, you still felt like you wanted to give that kid directions and tell him what to do. Show me on your talker. But we talked about how that's maybe not the best strategy, or that we don't get the best results that way. So what are you going to do differently? Yeah, I'm going to practice more self-talk. Great. Then we do another session where we record again, and then we measure that recording, and guess what happens? They get better. They get better at modeling. People leave knowing what to do, feeling more supported, like, oh, okay, I had a coach that helped me through this. I wasn't on this journey alone. And when you do the measurement, they go, oh my gosh, I know what I'm doing. I feel confidence in my abilities to model more. But if you just say model, it's too nebulous, right? So it's breaking it down into the small chunks and having a coach that goes along with you. And you might be thinking, when do I have time to do coaching, right? This is something about thinking about how do we reframe our therapy model, where maybe it's not all direct. Maybe part of that is indirect, that we're working with the communication partners. All of us here, there's a bunch of different people from all over the world. You're going to have to figure that out a little bit. How does that work in your neck of the woods practically? But we're doing it. And I know Rachel does it with parents. So if we're doing it, that means other places can do it. So that's my nutshell answer for how to get other people to model. You do training, you do coaching, you make them feel supported. We're all in this giant initiative together of learning language with AAC.
Before I jump in, because I have some ideas too, is there anybody who wants to come on mic? Raise your hand, and I think that Chloe or Vicky can probably help to kind of expand on what Chris said or add something to that. I feel like I find when I get super specific, the more specific I can get to help people, the better the outcomes. So if you can work with a communication partner very briefly to figure out a specific word or phrase in a specific routine, how many times they think they can practice that. Again, it goes along with the coaching, but it helps communication partners really anchor in to exactly what they're supposed to do. And if you can start with one word and one phrase in one routine and get really good at that thing, then all of a sudden you have this launching off point to help communication partners expand and feel successful. Because part of the challenge is, if I'm modeling and I don't see immediate success, which unfortunately we know that that's not exactly how it works with modeling all the time, right? We don't always see immediate success when we start doing something with our students. But oftentimes we'll lose momentum, and then all of a sudden communication partners aren't bought in because they haven't seen that success. And so if we can get really clear, finding a motivating routine, finding a word or a phrase, and helping our students be successful with that, and also coaching communication partners in that, then all of a sudden we have a strong foundation to kind of launch into expanding into another word or phrase, another routine. And that's how we can start to kind of incrementally see success.
Other thoughts and people putting stuff in the...
It does look like Sabina mentioned, as a parent, I'd included training staff on AAC in my daughter's IEP. I also created a file where I put in one-page sheets about the basics of modeling, the do's and don'ts of modeling, and some other one-page handouts from the AAC coach. And the staff found that very helpful. I think any way that we can streamline some of the learning and make it asynchronous can be really useful for communication partners, especially if they're new to AAC. And I think also, to add to that, having a place to go where they know that they can find resources. There's a lot of AAC resources out there. And so having it really streamlined can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Anonymous attendee said, what do you mean by indirectly training communication partners? Well, I think someone else put, like, you can make videos, you can be listening to podcasts like this. But I was specifically mentioning another component of coaching, adding think of training as I'm explicitly telling you what to do. Like, we're explicitly telling you to push buttons, right? And plan by picking 2 or 3 words and or more, and teaching those explicitly. But again, someone might not know how to do that. So this is the coaching is, all right, now that you know what you're supposed to be doing, let's guide you through by asking you reflective questions about how you think how you did when you were practicing, right? In the same way that a professional athlete might watch a video and again, I use soccer, right? And hey, look, you didn't score a goal there. You took a shot. You didn't score a goal. What did you do? What did you do with your leg? Oh, I kicked with my knee rather than from my hip. Yeah, okay. So what will you do differently next time? I'm going to plant my foot and I'm going to swing from my hip. All right, let's see how you go in the game next time. You're asking, same thing. Oh, I'm sitting next to the kid and they didn't I didn't know what buttons to push. Oh, okay, what will you do next time? Maybe I'll practice a little bit beforehand. Great. All right, let's practice a little bit beforehand. What words? Let's find those words that you might be that you think you might be saying when you're in this lesson, or in this experience.
Mm-hmm.
Fair.
Yeah. And I find that communication partners often have a challenge with knowing what words to model. Like, that's one of the holdups, is like, there's so many words on here. I don't know. I'm not sure. And so, like, that coaching process can really help communication partners feel more confident in the words that they could model in situations with success.
Yeah. So I'll just throw out there, I'm unmuting myself, and add that, so I teach grad students how to do this, and being very specific and giving them time frames sometimes is really helpful. When I've pushed into schools before, I was like, can you give me 5 minutes 3 times a day? So think about what are routines that you can add 5 minutes of modeling around getting yourself ready to go sit down at your desk or something like that. And then 5 minutes of during snack time. Snack time is really easy to model during then. So just very specific, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 5 minutes then. I've never had a teacher tell me that they couldn't give me 5 minutes. So that has worked well.
Awesome.
I love that.
I got one more too. There are 2 mnemonics that sort of live out in the space. There's probably more, and you could make up more. I know people that have made up their own based on their school mascot or something like that. But Jill Center and Matt Baud, they're 2 clinicians/researchers from the Chicago area, have something called SMORES. That's an acronym. You can go look at what they've created. And Tabby Jones-Woolaber has made one called Master Pal. These acronyms are strategies to help you learn the skill of modeling. So I'll just leave it there. You can go Google those and you can find those acronyms and what they mean. But we've certainly seen people like make giant posters. And now what does the M stand for in Master Pal? And what does the L stand for? And we practice it together so everyone's speaking the same language. All puns intended.
Mm-hmm. I'll add, someone added to the spreadsheet, I record myself working with a student and their device and add the video to Google Classroom and set up for the team. I love using videos as a way to show in a very quick moment of time exactly how to do something. And I also love to share videos as a way to celebrate progress, because I feel like when you're on a team and our student like finally said go for the first time spontaneously, or they're finally, asking for the specific YouTube video that they want to watch. Sharing those moments as a way to showcase what's happening can really build that momentum. It can keep the team going. And if you can find a way to share videos, whether that's on Google, whether that's a shared iPhoto album, there's so many different ways to share videos, of course, with the appropriate permissions. But it's a really great way to show instead of just telling. Like, nobody really wants to get this super long email about what you did in your session and how it went. I mean, we have enough emails in our inbox, right? People see that and they're like, no, 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 I don't have time for that. And so how do we create these moments of learning for people that are quick, easy, and don't feel like so overwhelming?
All right, I'm going to read the next question, shall we?
Let's go.
What are you doing in your own practice / recommending to SLPs / families for teaching children to read, write, and spell? What evidence-based practice do you use? All right, everybody. See what you put in there. Be curious if there's any, I don't know, books maybe that you've read that is about this topic. If there's any specific program you use or anything.
I really want someone to come on mic. Just saying. We'd love to hear your voice. No pressure, but it would be fun.
Rachel, a good strategy to use is wait time. If you just wait, students will eventually start using that AAC. You model for them and then they...
That's right. Ooh, Abigail, she in the chat, comprehensive literacy for all. Karen Erickson and David Copenhaver. I know, I wonder if I can reach mine. Mine's over here. Chris is doing.
Get out of my brain, Rachel Madel. Yeah, here's my copy.
You can't see it. I think I need to put it next to me. That's right. Yeah. I got all types of Post-its in mine.
Abigail, one of the reasons we both brought that out, and I bet, Vicki, you knew that's what we were hinting at too, right? That book is that I'll tell you, in our neck of the woods, we don't want just us and the handful of speech therapists to read it. We want like everybody to read it and do a book study around it and analyze, how can I infuse the ideas in this book into my current practices. So that's one thing. It's not a handful, it's everybody. It's like all hands on deck. Let's do a book study around it, read one chapter a month, maybe take an entire year to get really understand and then start implementing phases. Now, I know some people are like, Chris, our kids don't have a year. I get it. The other strategy that I sort of say is that, so I live and work in Virginia. Virginia just passed something called the Virginia Literacy Act. It's essentially saying every kid is going to learn how to read. Thank you, Virginia. The government did something that I approve of here, and I'm champion. All right, let's go. And what they do, though, is they said, here's some things that you can only use things off this list. So the philosophy here is, okay, if every other kid is going to be using sort of this scripted program of how to do reading, then why wouldn't we do that for our AAC users as well? Let's try and use whatever anyone else is doing, maybe make some adjustments if we have to, because sometimes a scripted thing like is make a sound or something, and maybe the AAC device doesn't make a particular sound, or even if it does make that sound, maybe you wouldn't want to go and use that keyboard to make that sound. So maybe you would make some adaptations or some changes to the scripted program, but why not use what everyone else is using as if you can? Right. Let's start. What's the least dangerous assumption is that I can teach the teachers and the students how to work with the program that everyone else is using. Fair?
Yes. It looks like Abigail wants to come on mic, but she's a teacher who has a parent-teacher conference in 14 minutes. I think we got time. That's plenty of time. Let's bring Abigail on. I also, while Abigail's coming on, Isabella said every SLP should read the book Reading the Brain by Stanislas Dehaene. I'm really butchering that name. But what I am going to do is I'm going to put it in the spreadsheet. Whoops. so that we have that as a resource. I haven't heard of that book, but I'm eager to learn more about it. Oh, it looks like Abigail's on. Yay.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
We hear you.
So I started geeking out on comprehensive literacy for all in 2020. And then the pandemic hit, and I was geeking out on the Loma podcast, did a whole book study on it. I listened to you guys all the time. I was a teacher that found myself staying home and being a teacher to I took a leave of absence to be a teacher in para to my son, who uses AAC and is a first grader. And as a SPED certified teacher in Missouri, I didn't know how to teach literacy to a kiddo. How do you do that without without those sounds? And so I just geeked out on it. And we have been so lucky the last 2 years. We've been to Camp Alec. My son has worked with Karen Erickson. We are so lucky. And one of our SLPs at his school actually went to camp so she could get trained on it. So it really is a book that every time I join another book study or re-listen to the Loma podcast in the car, it is really helpful and makes me think of it in another way, in a way I can implement it. So I highly recommend that. There's a ton of other resources too, but that's a great starting point, and then building from there.
I love it, Abigail. I'm curious, what was one aha moment where it changed what you were doing or how you were thinking about literacy?
I think I realized that as a teacher, my son is not going to show me what he can do in a neurotypical way. And I needed to play to his strengths. He has a syndrome. It's a neurological syndrome. So grabbing things or writing things isn't happening. So having magnets is very helpful for him. So we use magnet letters or, making words. When we're writing, he has an Accent 800. We connect it to a Chromebook and it goes straight into a Google Doc. And luckily, his SLP last time made a joke. They have 2 SLPs, and so they decided they were going to trick the other SLP, and he made a menu for lunch, and it was like, on Monday you have to eat trash, and he had to spell it out, and it was like diapers, and he thought it was hilarious, but he was so proud of it. And looking at it, it's not, there's so many errors on it, but he was proud, and it was him writing just like a kindergartner or first grader would. And so I think I just playing to his strengths and making it be fun. His preschool teacher one time told me carnival teaching. Sometimes you have to do that. And that's not a bad thing, to engage your student to want to do something more.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love especially thinking about organic, authentic opportunities for literacy. It's like, it has to be engaging, it has to be motivating. And that's always the lens that I'm thinking through when I'm trying to integrate literacy into the work that I do with students is, take something that's super motivating, like finding your favorite YouTube video or searching for your favorite ice cream on, a specific website of the ice cream shop that you go to. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can incorporate literacy. And to your point, Abigail, making sure that it's motivating, because so often we're like I'm seeing things in the classroom, like, let's spell cat, let's spell book. And it's just like, if that's the way we're approaching literacy, then we're not going to be very successful. We're not going to get very far. And so incorporating motivating interests and authentic opportunities for literacy practice is great. I love that.
And one thing, I think for him is being around other kiddos, teenagers even that are when we go to Camp Alec, he's with other people that use talkers, and he feels like he's around others and loves it. And, he went to camp and he still has a letter that he wrote to David Copenhaver that he wrote, he responded back and, because he wasn't there this summer. So it's just, there's engagement there that makes him kind of start to see why literacy is so important. And that's just my goal, see how far we can get with literacy. And because just trying to achieve that snug is kind of where we're at.
Yeah. The other thing I loved about what you said is, he made a lot of errors, but he was really proud of what he did. And I feel like so often when we're thinking about literacy, it's like this, well, that's not how you spell this. And I just think that that type of corrective feedback can be really detrimental. And how do we foster kids being brave enough to try to spell something and really just embracing whatever they decide that they want to write about, however they decide to write about it, and really building off of that, I think is a huge piece that might be missing in some of the classrooms that at least I'm observing. And I think that that's so true, just making sure you're building off of what kids are showing you. And we always have opportunities to then model and teach after the fact, but really letting kids become more independent and, of course, being autonomous in what they choose that they want to write about.
Yeah, and just making sure that they understand failure is not failure. Failure is a first attempt in learning. I tell my 8th graders that I teach a computer tech class, which is kind of funny, but my whole thing is assistive technology changes the world. And yeah, you just gotta let them fail. It's a good thing. And it's not a bad, you keep trying. You're walking now because hopefully you were, capable of trying and getting up, and you kept falling, but you kept getting up. So I think as a society, we want to fix it. And it's sometimes we have to hold ourselves back and let it be messy.
Totally. Thank you so much, Abigail. This is great. So happy you came on, Mike.
Yes, Abigail, that's awesome. Good luck with the parent-teacher conference.
All right. Any other ideas?
Isabella was going to come on and talk about the book a little bit, Reading in the Brain.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, Isabella, welcome.
Thank you. So Reading in the Brain, I agree. Every SLP should definitely read it. It's a great perspective. It's a little bit different than some of the other things that we see in our field with the perspective from SLPs. Stanislas is actually a neuroscientist, and I believe he's in Sweden. I could be wrong on that, but the book is really great, and it goes into a lot of detail about what our brain actually does and what is actually required for us to read. There's a lot of great evidence with neural imaging, like MRIs, fMRIs, to show the different areas in the brain that are used. And he actually has conducted a lot of research comparing typical readers versus dyslexic or having other language disorders, and looking at the brain, and actually, regardless of ability, you are using the same areas. So everyone reads in the same way. And even if students are not at the same level at the beginning, when we provide intervention, those images actually show that it's the same. So it's just a really great book to show kind of, while there's a lot of conversation about whole word reading and that approach, it's really important to understand what actually goes into reading and all the little tiny things that we as skilled readers don't even have to think about. We read an entire book and we're not thinking about that our eyes have to see the print in a certain margin to be able to identify the letter. And so it's a great book, and it's actually very palatable. It's not written in a way where you feel like you don't know what he's talking about, which I think a lot of neuroscientists that's kind of how things are written. So it's really refreshing to actually read a book that is so scientific in that way and truly have an understanding on what he's talking about, and just the importance related to our field in teaching students, regardless of disability or ability, that every brain works in the same way, and changing access and changing how we provide services or how we teach reading changes based on what a child's needs are, but the approach and all the steps that a child has to have or a person has to have to read are the same. So we kind of have to make sure that, well, yes, we want to make sure that we're building vocabulary and students are getting more access to more words, also teaching, those smaller portions. I say smaller in air quotes because it's still very challenging, but things like decoding and encoding, because ultimately, you know, when you mentioned at the very beginning with adult AAC users, you know, typing to spell or sorry, spelling to on a keyboard or however they're spelling to then communicate, like speech to text. You know, if you don't have good spelling, a lot of times our systems are not advanced enough to like identify that that word is the word that they want, and they, you know, it's misspoke. So the importance is, there's an equal importance for like learning those kind of details in reading and spelling and writing, while also I definitely agree that adding vocabulary adds a lot of depth to a person's ability to communicate freely and autonomously.
Love that. I love all of that. Thank you so much, Isabella, for sharing. You know, that's a really important point there. You're talking about the neuroscience. Like, it feels like every educator, whether you're a speech therapist or any teacher, should be studying what the brain does, right? Because that's what that's really what we're doing, is like helping people become better learners, right? And then I love what you mentioned there. And I think this is complements what we were saying earlier about having all the different dimensions of reading and making sure that we're teaching all of them, right? Some programs only work on reading comprehension. Well, this kid, we got to get comprehension first before. No, we're doing all of it, right? What I mean by all of it is phonics, phonemic awareness, reading fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Right? If we have all of those things, then we want to make sure we're checking off all those boxes and doing that the last thing I will summarize, everybody, in a fun way so that it doesn't suck.
Oh, I love it. Sabina actually added in the chat, I like your podcast episodes between Aaron Sheldon and Karen Erickson. Yes, those are good ones, actually, talking about the importance of literacy. And I think that to that point, sometimes we do have to sell literacy for some reason, like, which feels shocking to me. But, you know, so many parents that I work with, they don't they can't even wrap their head around their child being literate. And it's oftentimes just based off of limiting beliefs that they've heard from their doctor, from other SLPs, from their teachers. And so I think that part of this has to do with mindset, right? Having the mindset that all children are, you know, capable of learning how to read and how to write. And it's absolutely essential in order for students to have access to all of the words that they will want to use for communication. And so I love that Sabina just shared that podcast episode, because if you're working with a team and they're not fully bought in, that's a really great episode to share about the importance of literacy.
All right, I got two more before we move on to the next question. Look up CAR and CROWD. Those are more acronyms to go look them up. And these are, again, strategies you would use to build the skill of shared reading, CAR and CROWD. And then the last thing I'll say is, for people just getting started, to marry the first question with the second question here is, I think you could a general sweeping statement that would not be true in all cases, but maybe, again, if you're just getting started, would be when you're reading a book, and we're trying to model words, model the core and spell the fringe. So 80% of the time you're going to be modeling core, and when you get to a fringe word that a kid doesn't really need to have on their device, flip over to the keyboard and start spelling it out and talking about those letter sounds. Enough where the word prediction of maybe the device would pick it up, and you can, oh, look, there's the word. It recognized the whole thing, and there's the shape of the word. Let's say the whole thing out together. Like, just getting started, if you have nothing else, that's something you could do tomorrow. Right?
Yes. It's always something that I'm just doing naturally with students now. I'm searching for an image on Canva while I'm doing some type of, you know, therapy activity. I'm always working on incorporating literacy. First letter of the word, first sound. You know, these are things that we can just start integrating with what we're doing. And it can be really helpful for our students to start getting exposure to their keyboard, to letters, to letter sounds, all the things.
So funny you mentioned Canva, Rachel, because check out the next question.
Okay, I'm just going to interrupt really quick that we have about 1 minute left.
Oh, okay. We're not going.
Oh, we thought we had 10.
Sorry.
Okay. That's
Right,
okay.
right. You did send that email. Okay, well, Grace, in 1 minute left, we're going to say is Grace is asking about signs. Grace, I don't know if you're in the United States, but there's a whole bunch of seniors that graduate doing capstone projects or National Honor Society, and they are doing nonsense work like painting bookshelves or something. Go to your local high school and say, hey, high schoolers, I need signs made. You're awesome at Canva. Who wants to do this for National Honor Society credit or capstone project credit, right? There's your key. Then they'll do something meaningful with their time. Rachel, take us out.
I have one more idea. Use humor. If you wanted to stand out, say something funny and use ChatGPT to find something funny. Oh, thank you guys so much.
Thank
Okay.
you, Rachel.
Yes, thank you guys for being here. Please come listen to our podcast. And yeah, we're really excited to air this episode.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.